Good morning to each one, and welcome to this service. If you have your hymns of the church with you, please turn to number 32. Give to our God immortal praise. Number 32. No soul,
give to our God immortal praise, mercy and truth are all His ways, wonders of grace to God belong. Repeat His mercies in your song. Give to the Lord of Lords renown, the King of Kings with glory crowned. His mercies ever shall endure, when lords and kings are known no more. He built the earth, He spread the sky, and fixed the starry lights on high. Wonders of grace to God belong. Repeat His mercies in your song. He fills the sun with morning light. He bids the moon direct the night. His mercies ever shall endure, when suns and moon shall shine no more. He sent His Son with power to save, from guilt and darkness and the grave. Wonders of grace to God belong. Repeat His mercies in your song.
Number 76. To God be the glory. Number 76. No soul.
To God be the glory, great things He hath done. So loved He the world that He gave us His Son, who yielded His life an atonement for sin, and opened the life gate that all may go in. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He hath done. O perfect redemption, the purchase of God, to every believer the promise of God. The vilest offender who truly believes, that moment from Jesus a pardon receives. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear His voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give Him the glory, great things He hath done. Great things He hath taught us, great things He hath done, and great our rejoicing through Jesus the Son, but purer and higher and greater will be our wonder, our transport when Jesus we see. Praise the Lord, let the earth hear his voice. Praise the Lord, let the people rejoice. Oh, come to the Father through Jesus the Son, and give him the glory, great things he hath done.
At number 89. Holy God, we praise thy name. Number 89.
No. Holy God, we praise thy name. Lord of all, we bow before thee. All on earth thy scepter claim. All in heaven above adore thee. Infinite thy vast domain, everlasting is thy reign. Hark the loud celestial hymn, angel choirs above are raising, cherubim and seraphim in unceasing chorus praising, fill the heavens with soul, the apostolic train. Join thy sacred name to hallow. Prophets swell the glad refrain, and the white-robed martyrs follow, and from morn till set of sun, through the church the song goes on. Holy Father, Holy Son, Holy Spirit, three we name thee, though in essence only one. Undivided God, we claim thee, and adoring bend the knee, while we own the mystery.
Good morning and welcome von der Umwara to this service. Vi freuen uns für jeder einer, der du angeschaut hast und mit uns taub und Gott sein Wort nennt. Wir sind nicht gewarnt, dass wir die Menschen nicht sein können, nicht taub kommen können, aber trotzdem werden wir uns dort nicht beinloten und dass wir nicht Gemeinschaft an Gott sein Wort haben. Und von der an, weil wir uns waren, der Nennloten, was Gott uns zu lehren hat, durch sein Wort. Ja, wir gehen, welche ein paar Bekanntmerkungen haben. Ein ist, das Medwerk, was hier war, wird absehen, waren verschiedene Programme oder verschiedene Singen oder something, was es sind. wat ook livestreaming zijn. En we hebben God danken en prijzen voor al die godly mamas die er im huis zijn. En we hebben ook beden voor de widows, de witvrouwen, die in onze maat zijn en niet bloos die in onze maat zijn, die allebei verstrijd zijn. Wel we aan denken, wel we something doen dat zij kan, dat feilen dat we aan denken doen. En waar we aan denken, en de tijd waar we zijn, waar het ware is bij deze tijd, we zijn dat je zeer veel nieuwe bleren in deze tijd. Zeer veel boom en gras kan veren. We zijn dat je levende leeft op. We zijn waar God de je gemerkt heeft en waar dat alle schaffen dat. Want dat ijs wegschmelt, dan je het granje bleren. En we kunnen God zijn creation doen. En we stellen een hospital. En als nu war het thuis, nog niet ganz gezond, maar dat is al veel beter. En zij zijn zeer dankbaar daarvoor en vrijen zich dat we hand met een top met je leeft in je bed. Wat zoiets van de bekendmerking. En zo van der en jankert mij nennt te gaan en mijn boodschap stond, je wist het vanaf van Medwerk Bible Study. Mir wird sehr viel wert, wat we Medwerk op Bibelstudie hielden. En in je het part vangt door something aan te leven aan mij, waarvan deze boodschap van der wat zijn. En als we er gaan, we ons opnemen te beden. Voor in Himmel, we komen voor die en we danken die voor die leven. We danken die voor die genade, wat du hast aan ons mensen. We danken die dat du ons aannemen is zoals we zijn. En vooral we danken die dat du ons leiden is door die woord en ons aanwijzingen geven is en die woord. Dus zijn we zo dankbaar voor. Vooral we vragen dat dit woord van jou nog wordt ons reden en dat we worden kunnen op zijn en aannemen en dat in ons leven applyen wat die woord ons leren deed. Voor zij in deze tijd hier, wanneer we aan die woord nemen, in Jezus zijn naam. Amen. De Bibelstudie handelt zich van familie en wat kunnen we doen om wat bijdragen dat de familie nog God zijn wel nog leven deed, dat de familie dat bijdragen tot de kerk. En als dat wat we alles kunnen doen. Wat kunnen we bijdragen als familie, dat dingen beter worden. Einzelne persoon, dat de familie beter schaffen dat. En we zijn een aanvang als God mensen gemerkt had, een familie aanvangen dat de teufel dan al versucht, dat te verhinderen. We zagen dat Kain zijn broeder doodschloeg, weil hij hem niet vertrouwen kan. En dat is immer nog zo dat een ram spelen dat de teufel wel in de goede familie verhinderen. En waar we dat niet toelaten. En als God geen vrouwen deed, wo zijn broeder weer, dan zegt hij, wat zal ik naar mijn broeder oppassen? Ik weet niet hoe. God vraagt Kain, wo ist dein Bruder? En dan zeg je, ik weet niet. Zal ik naar mijn broeder oppassen? En dit hebben we zeer veel uitnemen. God wist wat Kain gedaan had. Hij weet wat hij gedaan had. Maar hij vraagt Kain, wo ist dein Bruder? En Kain is dat dan zo, zal ik naar mijn broeder oppassen? En van dit, ik heb me door een beetje mijn schriftsteden nu gekeken. En hoe wichtig dat is, dat we kijken dan, wo zijn onze Geschwister, wo zijn onze broeder, wat doen we, wat gaat en tot? We vinden zeer veel van wat Jezus geleerd heeft. En we hangen dat in 3 stekken, in 3 verschillende wegen een beetje neer te kijken. Eerstens, wo we ons leven zullen. En tweitens, wo we de leven bewijzen zullen. En drittens, wo we ons aan dem kan tragwezen, wanneer we kort gekomen zijn, ans denken houden. En deze drie verschillende wegen om dat een beetje uit te hebben. Het eerste waar we kijken, waar Jezus ons leren dat ons ondereinander goed te zijn en te leven. Wanneer wir uns Frauen selber nur ans Bruder abpassen, dann würden wir sagen, das wird nicht schaffen, wenn wir unsere Geschwister einmal herangehen und passen ab, was der alle deuten. Das ist nicht, was es von reden wird. Aber ich glaube, das redet davon, dass wir gucken, was können wir mit beitragen, dass es kann gesünder schaffen. Und Jesus sagt, dass es steht, wat is onze opgave ondereinander? En dan zegt Jezus dat ze staat in Johannes 13, vers 34 en 35. Dat zijn zeer bekende versen. Maar daar zegt dat ze staat, ik geef jullie een nieuw gebod. Je zal jullie ondereinander goed zijn. En wanneer we bloß bij hier würden lesen, dann haben wir noch nicht eine Mut, wo Gott oder von was wir lernen können, um Gott sein. Aber dann sagt Jesus wieder, krieg so als ich jün Gott gewahr sein. Und wenn wir uns da fragen, dann, wo Gott wie Jesus uns? Hier ist sehr viel Band, wenn wir uns fragen, wo Gott wie Jesus uns? Und das sagt uns, dass wir uns so gut, dass sein Leben ganz geben wird für mich und für dich. Und dann dort ist so gut, dass uns wir, und dann so soll wir uns untereinander gut sein. Und dann sagt er, jene Leib einer für den anderen soll groß so groß sein, als meine Leib für jene wir. Wo groß wie Jesus seine Leib für uns. Er hielt nicht treu von seinem Leben, wens der Leib, was er hat für mich und die. Und so hier können wir sagen, wo Gott uns wir, und so gut soll wir uns untereinander sein. Wenn dort passieren wird, dann in 35. Vers sagt es, wenn die Leib untereinander haben, wird allemal sein, dass die meine Jünger sind. Dass die meine Jünger sind. Und so das ist mein Verlangen, dass wir das wollen können leben, dass Menschen sagen, dass wir Jesus seine Jünger sind. Und dass wir diese Life practicen, dass wir diese Life ausleben. Und dann in Johannes 15, Vers 12, da sagt er, das ist mein Gebot, dass ihr untereinander so gut sind, als ich gut sind. Das hat er noch bestätigt. Der Johannes bestätigt das noch, dass so gut als Gott uns ist, so gut soll wir uns untereinander sein. Und dann der 13. Vers, keiner hat mehr Raum an den Nächsten als das, dass er sein Leben für seine Freunde geben wird. So, keiner hat mehr Raum. Jesus, der gibt so viel Raum, er gibt sein Leben für seine Freunde. Ein Freund ist mehr als bloß du hast wer. Ein Freund vertelt wir alles, was uns das geht, wo wir feiern. Ein Freund, da haben wir tiefe Gemeinschaft mit. Und das ist, wo Leib Jesus da anschaut. Ein Mann, der reist nur an einer Stadt, wo sie Missionaren hatten und wo eine Kirche anfangen dort. Und er kam daheim, es war stürmig, schneiig, kalt. Und als er durchkam, dann wurde er ändert, du hast eine Schwierigkeit gewesen, manche Native Menschen. Und durch dem, dass die Schwierigkeit du warst, es bei dir kommt, dass ein Mensch es werden, den Lehrer sind jung, es werden angebracht wegen Verschiedenheiten. Und das Lehrer sagt, weil Stadt zu Stadt geworden ist, ein von den Missionaren, oder ein von, wenn er den ersten witte Mensch, was er wird sein, dem wird er anbringen. Für das sein Sehen ist angekommen. Das Mann, was da angekommen ist, er sagt, das ist Joy Roberts, und er hat nur das Lehrer. Es ist 15 Mil auf, aber er hat daheim und fragt sich, wo das Mann wohnt, was das Schwur gemerkt hat, dass er den ersten witte Mensch will dort merken. wat hij zijn wordt. En Joy Roberts vindt dat huis waar hij woont en gaat erheen. En als de leraar dan terugkomt, dan trekt hij zijn hand een beetje ter zijde. En dan zegt hij, ik heb gehoord wat du geschworen hast, dat de eerste witte mens wat du zijn was, die was die aanbrengen. En hier zijn ik ben nog niet bevrijd. En dan kost mij dood meer. Wees dus, Joy Roberts zegt dat wanneer de leraar wordt een witte dood meer en dan worden de witte weer en dan wordt het een lange jaar geven. Hij gaat eraan en zegt dan door mij en dan kan dat door te eind zijn. Ik wil mijn leven geven voor dat. Als hij dat ziet, dat de man zo open is en zo vrij is en zich aanstelt, dan zegt hij dan, kom maar neer, we hebben mal verteld. En dan eerst vraagt hij, wat komt dat du naar mij komt en die opstelt? Wer merkt die, wer geeft die zo moed als dit? En dan zegt hij, han ze een paar stunden top gereed en dan heeft de leraar den schwur teruggenomen dat hij geen mens wil doodmerken en heeft entscheidt Christus te volgen. So this Joy Roberts, hij geeft zijn leven gans. Tim something stop. En zo, dat is mijn verlangen dat we ook worden kunnen ons leven geven voor onze nächsten zum Goden. Hoeveel trouble had hij door kunnen verbeen, wens hij zijn leven gans geven deed. Paulus, die redt ook van deze lui, wat we zullen haben, einer ten anderen. In Römer 13, Vers 8 sagt es, es steht, sie keinen irgendwas schuldig, bitte der lui einer zum anderen. Wils wer seine nächsten Gott ist, haft getan und was das Gesetz verlangt. Wir sollen nicht Menschen irgendwas schuldig sein, aber wir sollen immer weiter dort sein, dass ich soll noch mehr Leben geben. Ich soll der Leben ganz ausleben, was wir an Jesus sein können. In 1. Thessalonicher 4, Vers 9 sagt es, was der Leben einer zum anderen anbelangt, darüber braucht wir jünd nicht schreiben, weil Gott selbst jünd gelehrt hat, einander gut sein. So, wenn wir nicht gut sein, wie unsere Mitmenschen uns nicht leben können, haben wir von Gott dann all was gelehrt, als die Frau und uns. Paulus sagt, dass Gott selbst hat uns gelehrt, uns untereinander zu leben. Petrus lehrt das auch und sagt in 1. Petrus 1, Vers 22, weil sie jünd an der Wahrheit holen und jene Säulen durch den Geist und wahre Bruderleib gereinigt haben, sieht ihnen einander wirklich und von Herzen gut. Weil wir unsere Säulen und Bruderleib gereinigt haben, dort ist, wo wir die Kraft haben, wirklich gut zu sein. Und dort ist mein Verlangen, dort auch zu tun. Johannes, der schriftet in 1. Johannes 3, Vers 11, so steht, sagt es, uns ist dort von Anfang an gesagt worden, dass wir uns untereinander gut sein sollen. Dass wir uns untereinander gut sein. Das ist uns von Anfang an gesagt worden. Und das ist, was wir auch immer waren, an sich kennenlernen, nicht sanken, dort sind leben, dort sind vertrauen, dort sind gut sein. In Vers 12 sagt es, die sollen nicht so sein als Kain, der von Beisem stand in seinem Bruder dort mögt. Und woran mögt er am Tod? Weil seine Worte eierreich werden und er weiß, dass sein Bruder seine Worte gereich werden. Wofür sei wir dort, wann wir weten, dass wir reich sind, und wir sehen, dass somebody ist reich, dass uns das bodern wird. Woran bodert uns das? Das wir wissen, was Gott an uns gesagt hat, dass uns überführen, dass wir sollen was tun. Und dann können wir entscheiden, unzufrieden sein, oder wir können entscheiden, gehen der Trag stellen und die Dinge mit Gott in Ordnung stellen. 1. Johannes 4, Vers 7 sagt, liebe Freunde, weil wir uns untereinander gut sind, Wils Leib stammt von Gott. Wer der Leib hat, ist von Gott geboren und er kennt Gott. So der Leib kämpft von Gott, wie ut uns selbst, wir haben nicht so viel Leid, dass wir in allen Umständen können gut sein, dass wir leben können uneng. So dort ist der Port, wo wir uns leben sollen, was Jesus uns lehren hat. Und soll ich nur meinen Bruder abpassen? Soll ich kicken, wo mein Bruder ist? Das ist eine Frau, wo wir uns durch diese Message wollen fragen. Wir sollen uns gut sein, und wenn ich mein Bruder von Horten gut sein, dann passe ich nicht ab, was er alles tut, aber dann kick ich, als ich kann was beitragen, das andere, was scheiner gehen. Wo beweis ich diese Liebe dann zu anderen Menschen? Wo kann ich diese Liebe uitleven? Dort haben wir uns hier 9 Schriftstellen, oder vielleicht ein paar mehr, aber 9 Punkte, wo wir uns beobachten, betrachten, als wir diese Dinge tun. Das ist something, mit was wir dort beweisen können, dass wir uns Nächsten gut sind. Und das ist uns untereinander ab. Und das ist der zweite Punkt. Uns untereinander abnehmen. Nehmen wir uns untereinander ab. Wenn ich weiß, du bist ein Bruder in Christus, nehme ich diese ab als ein Bruder. Oder wenn ich einen Mensch begegne, der ich nicht kann, nicht weiß, wer das ist, nehme ich den ab und weise ihm diese Liebe, dass er sich angenehm fühlen kann, dich bei mir. In Römer 15, Vers 7 sagt es, nehmt ihn untereinander so ab, als Christus gönnt, Gott zu ehren, abgenommen hat. So, wir können uns als Brüder, als Geschwister und Jesus, können wir uns leicht sehr gut sein und uns anwahlen, uns gut zu sein. Und das sollen wir auch tun. Aber wenn es hier sein wird, dass wir uns so sollen abnehmen, als Christus uns abgenommen hat, dann können wir uns fragen, wo kommen wir, mit was kommen wir nach Christus? Wir kommen belohnt, wir kommen schwer bedrängt und mit verschiedenen Sinnen können wir da haben. Und wo führt Jesus mit uns? Er nimmt uns ab. Nicht bloß dort, er vergab uns unsere Sünden. Er nahm uns ab und lässt uns anwählen, dass wir nicht im Port von ihm wären. Und dort ist so, als wir uns untereinander sollen abnehmen. Und der zweite Punkt, wir sollen uns untereinander abbühen. Abnehmen und dann abbühen, dort ist, was wir sollen tun. In 1. Thessalonicher 4, Vers 11 sagt es, du wir merken untereinander Mut und büten untereinander ab, so als die dort tun. Wenn wir in Christus sind, dann ist das something, was wir wollen tun. Das ist something, was uns rauskommen wird, einer den anderen abbühen. Das ist, was Paulus sagt, je tun dort. Aber er wird nach wahrer Mut sprechen, dann tut dort. Mut merken und abbühen, dort ist, wo wir uns fühlen. Und dort ist something, was wir uns anüben sollen, practicen sollen, dass wir das wollen tun, dass wir wollen Mut sprechen und dass wir wollen einer den anderen abbühen. Und der dritte Punkt ist, dein, da wir uns untereinander dein. Sei wir ehrlich, den Bruder zu dein. Wenn wir ehrlich sind zum dein, dort ist, wo der sich Wort abgenommen fallen, wurde sich was abgebüht fallen. In Galater 4, Vers 13 sagt es, Brüder, jünd haft Christus zur Freiheit verhalten. Bloß brucht die Freiheit nicht, das Fleisch den Willen zu loten. Und dann sagt es, deint einer den anderen ein Leib. So, das ist, was das braucht. Nicht nur ans Fleisch zu leben. So vielmals würden wir sagen, na, ich kann nun nicht Zeit, oder wir haben uns das zu Drag angegangen, ich kann nicht, oder ich weiß nicht, was mir das sagt. Jankert mich, ich habe selbst genug Dinge. Und wir kommen nicht dazu, dass wir unseren Bruder dienen wollen. Oder dass wir ehrlich sind zum Dienen. Jede Gelegenheit utnutzen. Wir können mal so und so viel tun, wir sind bloß eine Person. Aber da wir dort, was wir können, uns untereinander zu dienen. So, abnehmen, abbühen und dienen und dann drehen halten. In Galater 6, Vers 1 und 2 sagt es, Brüder, wenn ihr mal wem du betrafen, dat hij sich versündigt. Das kommt all nur sehr dich bei. Wenn wir mal wem du betrafen, dat hij sich versündigt, dann sagt es, dann soll je, die je jässlich sind, dem freundlich und leichttulich traghalten und pass ab für dich selbst, dass du nicht auch versucht wirst. So, und dann der zweite Vers sagt, halt einer den anderen seine Last drehen und dadurch tun, was Christus sein Gesetz verlangt. So, das hat hier mit Sinn zu tun. Und dann sagt es, die Last halten drehen. Und so, wo können wir die halten drehen? Wir können bloß immer wieder die Person zu check halten, dass in Jesus geht. Mit Sinn, da wir nicht mitgehen. Mit Sinn, da wir nicht bloß sagen, das ist okay. Da macht mit gehandelt. Aber wenn ein Bruder du es gefallen, dann sagt es, dann wenn du ein Geistlicher bist, dann bist du schuldig heimzugehen und halten den zu drehen und halten den zu rühren, dass er nicht darf, so dort leben. Und das sagt uns hier, dass wir sollen dort freundlich tun, wir sollen dort leichttulich tun und wir sollen den Trag halten. Das ist der Abgabe einer für den anderen. So, wir nehmen uns ab, wir bühen uns ab, wir dienen einander und dann halten wir noch einer den anderen drehen. Und wenn wir dort haben, dass wir uns untereinander drehen tun und halten drehen, was immer da verkommt, dann sagt es auch noch der fünfte Punkt, dass wir uns untereinander vergeben. So, wir können nicht einen anderen bloß halten drehen, wenn wir den nicht vergeben tun. Und so in Epheser 4, Vers 32 sagt es, sieht Leiber von Horten leichttulich einer zum anderen. Vergebt jünd untereinander so, als Gott jünd an Christus Jesus vergebt hat. So soll wir uns untereinander vergeben. Wo do wir diese Leib einer zum anderen praktizieren? Wir nehmen uns ab, wir bühen uns ab, wir dienen uns untereinander, wir drehen uns untereinander, wir vergeben uns untereinander. Dort Christus seine Leib an uns zu sein ist, dass sie sein, dass wir das Gebot, was Jesus uns geben hat, ausleben tun. Wenn wir nicht vergeben tun, und wie diese Einstellung zu haben, dass wir nicht können loslassen und nicht können vergeben, dann ist das so, als wenn wir uns viel kleine Kerb mitnehmen. Und dann, wenn wir einem Menschen begegnen und der tut something, was nicht so ist, was mich interessiert, dann stoppen wir in den Korb nehmen. Und dann begegnen wir deswegen und dann haben wir für den einen Korb und dann stoppen wir durch so was nehmen. Und dann so gehen wir ran mit einem Dollkorb und was ein Mensch hat getan, das leih wir nehmen. Und es steht, dass wir für jeden das leih wir nehmen und wir nehmen uns über dem so viel Korb voll mit, wir haben so viel Korb an uns randrehen, dass wir das meistens mehr erkennen. Und über dem dann knutsch wieder unser Taub und sagen, oh, das ist bloß so schwer. Das ist bloß so schwer. Und das ist, wenn wir nicht vergeben, wenn wir alle Menschen ihre Dinge mitnehmen. Wie immer war das in einen Korb leihen und der Korb war so schwer und wir können dort nicht drehen. Wir können nicht mehr halten, abbühen, wir können nicht abnehmen, wir können nicht teilen, wir können nicht halten, anderen drehen. Bis wir unsere Korb so viele Dinge getan haben und nicht vergeben haben. Und so, weil wir nicht Karv mitnehmen und andere Menschen ihre Fehler da alle anleihen und die für 20, 30, 40 Jahre immer wieder erwähnen, was der und der Mensch dann du und du mal zu mir sagt, oder der, was du und du mal dort und dort zu mir sagt, oh, das ist so schwer, und wo viel mir dort hat gesagt. Das meint, du hast noch ein Korb für die Materialien dessen, wo die alle Dinge von dem Mensch immer waren, benannt ist. Und weil wir leider loslassen, weil wir vergeben, weil wir nicht Korb-Materialien, wo wir alle Dinge nennen von anderen Menschen. Wenn wir von denen denken, wir wollen abpassen nur unsere Brüder, das ist kein Frau, und es soll nicht meinen Bruder abpassen. Das ist nicht der Ursache, dass wir hier reingehen und abpassen, wo wir einen Fehler merken und dann, wo wir dort in uns Korb nehmen und sagen, oh, der Bruder ist so fehlerhaft. Das ist nicht, was wir wollen. Wir wollen vergeben, so als Gott uns in Christus Jesus alles vergeben hat, so weil wir auch unsere Mitmenschen alles vergeben. Wem immer wir begegnen, was immer du getan hast, oder was immer da passiert ist, das will wir loslassen, das will wir vergeben, das will wir nicht mitdrehen, bis dort wird uns zu schwer. Und dann der erste Punkt, uns unterdun sind, dass wir horchen, dass wir willig sind, uns unter den Bruder zu stellen und hören, was er uns zu lehren hat, hören, was er uns zu sagen hat. In Epheser 4, Vers 21 sagt es, schenkt einer dem anderen ut ihr Volk für Christus. Das ist, was wir wollen. Wir wollen uns checken. Wir wollen so ein Bruder sein, wenn der sich unter uns stellen, der will sich checken zu das, was ich sage, dass wir nicht anders wollen sein, als Jesus Christus uns gelehrt hat, als er uns lehren hat, als er uns anleiten hat, als sein Geist uns anleiten hat. Wir wollen nicht anders sein, wenn sich wer will uns unter tun merken, dass er das feiern hat, dass diese Leib, was Jesus zu uns hat, wir auch verarmt haben. Da wollen wir nicht irgendwas tun, was am das Leben wird schwer merken. Da wollen wir something tun, was am wird abgenommen fallen, was am wird abbühen, was am wird dein, was am wird drehen halten, was am wird vergeben. So wir wollen unter tun, dass die was kennen mit Frieden unter tun sein. Und das würde ich wünschen, dass wir das von Herzen können tun. Wenn wir denken dann in Epheser 4, Vers 21 und 22, wurde wieder jetzt geredet von Lied untereinander und wo das falsch vielleicht angepasst ist, dass Lied sich untereinander unter tun sollen sein. Aber ich glaube, der Post auch sagt, dass wir als Brüder in Christus uns unter tun sind, dass wir uns einer unter den anderen unterstellen tun. Dort ist, was wir sollen tun. Dort ist, wo wir uns der Leib einer zu den anderen bewiesen tun. Und muss Gott Gnade und Weisheit geben, dass wir das auf eine rechte Weise tun, dass wir immer uns horchen, wir immer Ramans erst, dass das sich abgenommen fällt, dass das sich abgebüht fällt, dass das sich fällt, dass er das fallen kann, dass wir am Dein, dass wir am Haupten drehen, dass wir am verjeft haben, dass wir bereit sind, mit am Taub Dinge zu tun, mit am Taub zu schaffen. Und dann der 7. Punkt, weil wir uns untereinander anspornen. Anspornen, das hat mir zu tun, dass ich die was sein, du musst something. Und dass du mir was sein, du musst something. Du fehlt something zu tun, dass wir auch uns du wollen anspornen. In Hebräer 3, Vers 12 und 13 sagt es, seid ihr verbreitet, dass keiner von jünt und beiset und nicht glaubend das Wort hat, dat van den lebenden Gott aufkam. Red jünt untereinander alle Tag Motto, solange es dort noch von der Unheit, dort sich von jünt China durch die unschmerende Sinn hart merken lässt. So, dort wir uns anspornen tun und Motto sprechen. Und dass keiner darf durch seine eigene Natur in Sinn geraten und durch ein Leben. So dass wir uns Zeit nehmen, uns untereinander anspornen, Motto sprechen, solange als wir Zeit haben, solange als wir können, dass wir uns mit Frieden Motto sprechen tun. Und macht dort an uns auch lebendig sein, uns untereinander Motto sprechen. Dort ist Leib bewiesen, einer für den anderen. Der 8. Punkt, weil wir uns untereinander in Acht holen. Hebräer 10, Vers 24 und 25 sagt, weil wir taub holen und uns untereinander anspornen und gute Worte live bewiesen. Und gute Worte live bewiesen. So diese Dinge, die ich abgenannt habe, das sind Actions von unserem Glauben. Abnehmen, abbühen, dein, drehen, vergeben, anspornen. Und hier sagt er den Acht holen, so dass something, was unsere Worte mit uns Wandel taubstimmen an Jesus Christus. Und sagt er, weil wir uns anspornen und gute Worte live zu beweisen mit unserem Wandel. Nach der 25. Vers sagt er, von der Versammlung weichbleiben, so als eingedauert, dort wollen wir nicht. Aber viel lieber uns untereinander Motto sprechen und dort ist wichtig, weil es der letzte Tag nur kam, so als Geseinen. Der letzte Tag von uns Leben hier diese Erde, der kommt nur dran. Wir wissen nicht, wo neuer, aber der Tag kommt nur dran. Und was dann wird wichtig sein, ist, dass wir diese Leib einer den anderen bewiesen haben. Dass wir diese Leib einer den anderen in Worten bewiesen haben. Der 24. Vers, werde ich noch einmal lesen, sagt es, weil wir taub holen und uns untereinander anspornen en gode worden liv te bewijzen. Dat is niet something wat van ons zelf komt, maar dat is something wo we ons aan oefen zullen. Van de verzameling wegbleiben wollen we nicht, wenn es dort ist, wo wir Gott seine Gemeinschaft feiern von unseren Geschwistern. Wir feiern dort, wo uns Bruder, unsere Schwester, wo die in der Gemeinschaft mit Gott leben tun. Und dort hat uns abbauen, dort hat uns anspornen, auch über Jahr in diese Gemeinschaft zu segnen und zu forschen. Ein Kirchenlehrer, als op een frische steed, als frisch als een leraar angestellt en als hij daar aanvangt te leren in de kerk, dan maakt hij dat door een oudere man die alle zondag in de kerk is. En wanneer hij met denen vertellen, dan wordt hij eindelijk kan zeer schwer hier. Hij moet goed luid vertellen en hij kan zeer schwer hier. En dan als das Lehrer dann nieuwsgierig, als hij dan wat van de boodschap ervan, dat je beter, zoals hij irgendwas verstaan kan van dat, dan zegt hij, nee, niet. Ik kan dat bloos niet meer hier. En dan vraagt de Lehrer aan, hoe komt het dat u dan nog jede zondag in de kerk bent? En dan kijkt hij den Lehrer zo met grale ogen aan en dan zegt hij, bij de gemeenschap met de Heilige. Dat is wat mij abbewen, dat is wat mij fehlen. Ik brauche deze gemeenschap met de Heilige top te zijn. Wanneer ik dat niet horen kan. Maar ik kan dat feilen in deze omgeving. En met jullie top te zijn, dat buurt mij ab. En dat is zo'n omgeving als we merken zullen met onze woorden. Dat is zo als we dat zullen uitbrengen met onze wandel, dat mensen daarom aan zijn, dat zich de maag feilen doen, dat zich thuis feilen doen, wanneer ze niet hier kunnen, wanneer ze niet dingen kennen wat anderen kennen, maar dat ze zich de poort van feilen doen. Dat is wat mijn en dine opgave is, ons te en te practicen, dat deze atmosfeer ram ons wordt zijn, dat mensen zich thuis zich feilen. En dan de negende punt, opnemen, jas opnemen. Dat we bereid zijn jas op te nemen. Wo immer dat is, wo immer we zijn, dat we jas opnemen. 1. Petrus 4, vers 8 zegt het, ever alles zijt doen, dat niet kunnen leven einer zum anderen stieren kan, wils leefdag vele zinnen toe. Neemt gieren jas op, leven als grenzen wanneer kom. Zo waar we immer waren aan denken, dat we wellig zijn jas op te nemen, waar we deze leven uitstralen. En dan de derde punt waar ik van reden wil, is dat we ons einander een leven terugwijzen doen. Ik wil best nog een paar versen lezen zum Schluss, wo we ons einander een leven terugwijzen zullen. 2. Timotheus 4, vers 2 zegt het, dit is Paulus tot Timotheus, zegt het, predigt dat woord, of de tijd reich is of niet. Vermoon mensen, drijf eend, leer eend, aber blijf daarbij geduldig. Spreek aan motto dat ze doordat wat leren. Zo vermoon en aansporen dat ze doordat wat leren. Derde vers, wils door wat een tijd komen en dat ze de gezonde leer niet meer verdreven worden en ze worden zich leerders aanschaffen die zo leren als aan dat gefällt, die aan bloos nog de oren kittelen. Ze worden ihre oren van de waarheid wegdraaien en leven naar voren harken. Zowel we wakker zijn, dat we anderen vermoeden doen, dat we de gezonde leer uitbrengen, dat mensen kunnen teruggewezen worden. Kolosser 1, vers 28 zegt het, dessen Christus predigt we en warnen en beleren alle mensen en alle wijsheid, doordat zelf wel we en iedereen wat toebrengen dat ze volkomen in Christus zijn. En dit is allemaal waar mijn verlangen. En dat zal ook dien verlangen zijn. Andere mensen aan te sporen dat ze in Christus wonen kunnen. In 1. Thessalonicher 4, vers 14 zegt het. Brüder, ziet moedig en bewijst en wees de traag de onordentlich leven. Treist die de moed verrucht is, helpt de zwakke en schaft en haft met allen geduld. Zij doen dat keiner den anderen schlechtet met slechte treed toelt. Streef Streef immer nu een ander gouden te doen en dat ook te alle mensen. En dit is mijn verlangen, dat we ons een ander opnemen, opbouwen, duin, draaien, vergeven en onze doen zijn, aansporen en acht houden en dat we wel eens een jas op te nemen. Dat is live bewezen zoals voor Jezus zei dat je bood wordt ons gegeven dat we mensen zijn en doe onwoorden, ze erkennen dat we in Jezus Christus zijn. Zo, kijk wie waar onze bruiden dat gaat. Pas wie op waar onze bruiden dat gaat. Wel we ons een ander opbouwen en aansporen. En deze leven wat Jezus ons gegeven heeft te leven. Mag God je zegenen. Amen.
Good morning, children. Today we will have two stories, and they are both about obedience. Obedience means to promptly and cheerfully do the directions and wishes of those who are responsible for me. Our first story will be taken from Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln grew up as a poor boy, but when he became a man and was older, he became the President of the United States. In this story, can you see where the people obeyed right away and where they obeyed cheerfully? Abe was an obedient, hard-working boy. Others in the little farming community where his family had moved to in southern Illinois noticed this. The owner of the largest farm in the county had hired him and one of his friends to build a riverboat and fill it with flour, bacon, potatoes, and vegetables from his farm and float it all the way down the Mississippi River to New Orleans. After everything was sold, they returned home and gave the farmer all that they had been paid for his produce. One day, Abraham Lincoln was preparing for another trip down the river. He was going to make another journey to take some goods to trade in New Orleans. This time, he needed a new boat for the trip. He and some friends had chopped down some trees and had sanded them to make a nice, smooth flatboat that would float down the river with their goods. They had just finished constructing a canoe to go with their flatboat when two of the young men jumped into the canoe to try it out. The men began rocking the canoe to and fro in the strong current. The river was high and the current was strong. Men along the riverbank dropped their tools to watch the men in the rocking canoe. "Abe, look!" yelled one of the men. "Those men don't know how to steer the canoe. They're going to tip for sure," yelled another, pointing to the weaving canoe. Abe stopped to look. The men were right. Soon the canoe dumped its passengers into the swirling water. If someone didn't do something quickly, the men would surely drown in the freezing water. Abe ran downriver to catch up with the men. He spotted a huge tree that stuck out into the middle of the river. "Swim for the tree," he yelled. "You can do it. Don't give up. Swim hard." The men reached the tree and hung onto the branches. They were safe from drowning, but now there was a new problem. How would Abe and his friends rescue them from the middle of the river? The men were too exhausted and cold to swim against the mighty current. They would never make it to shore. Abe also knew that if something wasn't done immediately, the men would freeze. "Get some rope," he ordered the men on shore. The men rushed to find some. Did you spot how they immediately ran to find some rope? Meanwhile, Abe continued to call out to the men in the water. "Hang on there, we're coming for you. Hang tight." The men quickly returned with the rope, and Abe explained his plan. "We can tie one end of the rope to that big log over there," Abe continued. "I'll use the rope to guide the log downstream to the men that are holding on to. We'll put a person on the log, and that person can help the men out of the tree and onto the log. Then we can all work to pull them back to shore." "Jim," Abe asked one of his friends, "will you ride downstream on the log?" "Sure," replied Jim as he instantly waded into the angry river toward the log. After Jim had climbed aboard the log and was holding on tightly, Abe slowly began to let out the rope. As the current pulled harder and harder, Abe held firm. As he let out more and more rope, the log inched closer and closer to the tree where the men clung. "It's working!" shouted the men on shore as others held their breath expectantly. Then, just as Jim reached the men clinging to the tree, he looked down at the swirling, rushing river. He became scared. What if I fall in the river, he wondered. Instead of following Abe's instructions and staying on the log, he grabbed a branch and lifted himself into the same tree that the first two men were in. Now Abe had to figure out another plan. As Jim worked to make sure that he was safely in the tree, Abe pulled the log back to shore. Now there were 3 men to rescue from the river. "He would have been fine if he had just stuck with the plan," one of the men said. "I got another idea," said Abe. "Do you think you could pull me and all the others back on the log?" he asked the men on shore. "It won't be easy." "Of course," the men cried out in unison. Abe called out to the men in the river, "I'm going to ride this log downstream to bring all 3 of you back. Jim, when I get to you, can you catch the rope I throw?" "I think so," quaked Jim from his perch in the tree. "Abe, be careful or you'll drown like the others almost did," warned a man on shore. But it was too late. Abe was already on the log, pushing out into the water. The current caught the log and pulled it quickly downriver. The rope the men were holding uncoiled faster and faster. Closer and closer Abe came to the 3 men hanging into the tree. As Abe drew closer to where Jim sat, he wound up the rope and threw it to him. The plan was for Jim to catch the rope and pull Abe and the log through the rushing current safely over to the tree. A gasp rose from the men on shore as they watched Jim miss the rope. Abe and the log sailed past the tree further downriver. "He's missed the rope! Abe's gonna miss the tree! Quick, pull him back! We gotta try again," they yelled. "No, look," said another. "He's lassoed the tree. He's pulling himself back up the river." Abe had thrown his rope around the tree just as he sailed past it. The rope had caught, and now he was slowly pulling himself back up the river against the current until he reached the men in the tree. He helped the men onto the log and then yelled to the others to start pulling them back. With a shout, all the men on shore strained together, each one encouraging the other to pull with all their strength. Did you see how they were encouraging each other to cheerfully pull? Inch by inch, the log crept upstream till all 4 men were safely back on shore. Everybody lay on the bank, exhausted. Later, as the men warmed themselves around a hastily built fire, one of them turned to Abe and with chattering teeth said, "I guess you saved our lives." Abe just grinned back. Our next story is about an elephant. This elephant was trained by a boy, and so he obeyed his master really well. Heavy wheels rolled along the road, stirring up great clouds of dust. Horses strained and axles squeaked as the old wagons wound their way toward the edge of town. The circus was coming. Each wagon carried strange animals which the townsfolk had never seen before. There were lions, tigers, and elephants, camels, bears, and monkeys, zebras, giraffes, and peacocks. Children gathered along the road. Their eyes shone with eager anticipation as they crowded around the wagons, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ringmaster or the clowns or the high-flying acrobats. However, what the children were about to witness was more astounding than any circus act. They were about to see an example of obedience which they would never forget. As the wagons came to a stop in a large empty field which skirted the edge of the river just outside of town, several circus hands laid out the huge red and white tent on the grass. They carefully unfolded and unfolded and unfolded it until it covered almost the whole field. Others fitted long poles together and inserted them into brightly polished brass rings. Much to the children's surprise, a young man, not much older than they were, walked up and looked at the tent. He folded his arms and studied the situation. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared into the crowd of circus workers. A few minutes later, the young man reappeared. Walking next to his right shoulder was a magnificent young Indian elephant. As the young man stepped forward, his elephant moved obediently with him. When the young man stopped, his elephant stopped too. Hanging from the elephant's shoulders was a huge leather harness. It wrapped around the front of its neck and hooked together under his chest behind his front legs. It looked strong. As he stood there, the circus workers tied a thick, heavy rope to the harness. At the other end of the rope lay a large loop which the workers fitted around the base of the largest tent pole. Once everything had been carefully arranged, the young man whispered a single word into his elephant's ear. He simply said, "Kneel." The elephant never hesitated as it lowered its head and raised its front leg. The young man stepped up on the elephant's bent knee and swung himself up and straddled the elephant's neck just behind its ears. Then the young man whispered another word. He simply said, "Pull." Without even the slightest pause, the elephant leaned forward. The harness squeaked as it tightened around his shoulders. Every muscle in the elephant's body strained against the weight of the tent. Slowly but steadily, the bottom of the tent pole moved across the ground. As the bottom moved forward, the top of the tent pole began to rise. Higher and higher it rose until it was almost vertical. The whole weight of the tent rested on the pole, but the elephant didn't flinch. He continued to pull. His master once again leaned over and whispered a single word. All he said was, "Stop." The children saw the elephant stop abruptly in the middle of a step. The pole stood straight up and down. To pull even a few inches too far could send the whole tent pole plummeting over backwards, collapsing the tent and injuring the circus workers who risked their lives every time they pitched the big top. Everyone cheered as the circus workers feverishly staked down the edges of the tent to hold it in place. The elephant's job was done. In just a few hours, the tent would echo as the ringmaster shouted the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the circus is about to begin." There was just one problem, one small but disastrous problem. The workers, in their haste to prepare for the evening show, had pitched the tent in the wrong spot. The big top was supposed to be on the other side of the river, where all the food for the animals had been delivered a few hours before the circus had arrived in town. No food meant hungry animals. Hungry animals meant hungry lions. And hungry lions meant, oh boy. Unfortunately, the only bridge across the river was too far away to move the food before the evening show, and the circus tent was too hard to take down and move to the other side of the river. The show must go on. But how? Boldly, the young man stepped forward with his elephant still at his side. He whispered but one word into his elephant's ear. He simply said, "Fetch." Immediately, the elephant turned and headed toward the river. He stepped into the water, not knowing how deep it was. He waded deeper and deeper until only his back legs touched the rocky bottom. Not knowing how to swim, he balanced himself on his hind legs to keep his head above water. Eventually, he climbed out of the river on the other side. At first, the elephant appeared puzzled. His master had given him only one word of instruction. He looked back across the river at the young man who had sent him. He could see his master leaning against the tree with his arms folded, waiting. Doing what he was expected to do, the elephant carefully slid his powerful tusks under one of the pallets of food which lay before him and wrapped his long trunk securely over the top to hold the bags in place. Looking more like a forklift than an elephant, he turned and stepped back into the river. Holding the white feet high above the water to avoid getting it wet, the elephant worked his way back across the river. Setting the pallet of grain at his master's feet, the elephant looked expectantly at his master. But his master said nothing. He just leaned back against the tree and folded his arms. Again, the elephant looked puzzled. He looked at his master. He looked across the river. He looked at the heavy pallet of grain. Doing what he was supposed to do, the elephant plunged into the river. Across the water he went for the second load of grain. By the time he'd returned, the first pallet was empty. Workers busily distributed the food among the circus animals, but his master continued to lean against a tree with his arms folded. The elephant looked at his master. He looked at the food. He looked across the river. Without any further instruction, he plunged into the river a third time. Again and again, back and forth he went, all afternoon and into the early evening. He worked until he had carried the final pallet of feed across the river and set it at his master's feet. When all was done, the amazing elephant had fed the whole circus. Then, to everyone's surprise, he stepped up to his master, lowered his head, and began to purr. Though he hadn't eaten anything himself, though he had worked all day, though he was dripping wet and cold, the pleasant rumbling sound expressed the elephant's cheerful attitude. Inside the big top, the laughter of the children quieted and the lights dimmed as the words "ladies and gentlemen," "boys and girls" rang out throughout the circus, only because the obedience of the elephant.
Good morning. Take your hymn books and turn to number 705, I believe it is. Yep, 705. Search me, O God.
Search me, O God, and know my heart today. Try me, O Savior, know my thoughts, I pray. See if there be some wicked way in me. Cleanse me from every sin and set me free. I praise thee, Lord, for cleansing me from sin. Fulfill thy word and make me pure within. Fill me with fire where once I burned with shame. Grant my desire to magnify thy name. Lord, take my life and make it wholly thine. Fill my poor heart with thy great love divine. Take all my will, my passion, self, and pride. I now surrender, Lord, in me abide.
Then turn to number 723. Teach me, O Lord, to number my days. 723.
Teach me, O Lord, to number my days. Teach me to number my days, that I may apply unto wisdom my heart, that I may apply my heart. I am but a man, my years are but a day. Short will be my stand, and brief will be my stay, and I will not again e'er pass along this way. Teach me, O Lord, to number my days, oh, teach me to number my days. Teach me, O Lord, to number my days. Teach me to number my days,
and let me be wholly devoted to thee, to daily increase thy praise. Life is like the sand, soon trickle through the glass. Flowers we appear to perish as the grass. 1,000 years with thee, as yesterday is past. Teach me, O Lord, to number my days. Oh, teach me to number my days. Teach me, O Lord, to number my days. Teach me to number my days. And satisfy early my deep yearning heart, that I may rejoice always. 80 years and 10 are all our lives may hold. Fleeting years we spend, a tale so quickly told, and judgment greets us then, our Maker we behold. Teach me, O Lord, to number my days. Oh, teach me to number my days.
And for our last song, turn to number 749. Would You Live for Jesus, number 749.
So, would you live for Jesus and be always pure and good? Would you walk with him within the narrow road? Would you have him bear your burden, carry all your load? Let him have his way with thee. His power can make you what you ought to be. His blood can cleanse your heart and make you free. His love can fill your soul, and you will see 'twas best for him to have his way with thee. Would you have him make you free and follow at his call? Would you know the peace that comes by giving all? Would you have him save you so that you need never fall? Let him have his way with thee. His power can make you what you ought to be. His blood can cleanse your heart and make you free. His love can fill your soul, and you will see 'twas best for him to have his way with thee. Would you in his kingdom find a place of constant rest? Would you prove him true each providential test? Would you in his service labor always at your best? Let him have his way with thee. His power can make you what you ought to be. His blood can cleanse your heart and make you free. His love can fill your soul, and you will see 'twas best for him to have his way with thee.
Good morning. Yes, God's grace is with you, with us, and that is something that's very important that we remind us of each day. I trust I've said that so many times by now that you don't need a reminder of God's grace. God's grace, as we go through the Bible, we find again and again that that is what people held on to. And sometimes people were simply in bondage not to be able to focus on God's grace, and therefore went through life miserably. Okay, thank you again for coming and visiting us. It is good to know that we're in this together. And as you sit at home, and some of you are listening in on the radio, may peace rule your heart. Others are probably looking at the screen right now and seeing me there. I wish I could see you. Thank you for our song leaders that you make this effort in making a good singing here. So here at the church, for some of you who haven't been at IMF church, although this is your home church, this doesn't really look much of a regular church here. There's equipment blocking the aisle, and we have an audience of 9 people when I include myself, and that's what it is here. You that are at home, my desire is that you would still get a taste of this fellowship. Good. We have the bulletin before us, and there's a verse that you will notice. It's out of Ephesians chapter 6, verse 11, and it's speaking of the armor. Now, we who are not even familiar necessarily with battles and wars, much less of how they were in the old days. But in the old days, we can imagine that the man of Israel, the Jews, they would teach their sons and their little boys. They probably had all this toys to deal with because they were taught to defend themselves. Today, we do that on a spiritual level. You as man, you probably do this every day at your family circle, whenever of the time of the day that is, not important, but you do the same thing in a spiritual way where you're teaching your boys and girls how to defend and how to live in their spiritual lives. But I can just have an imaginary picture that the little boys and girls back in the days of Israel, they made shields and swords and helmets and all this imaginary stuff, and you would see them behind the corners or behind the trees of Israel, and they played the game, and they knew they were well equipped because that's how they were taught by their parents. And so now Ephesians 6 verse 11, we have this verse that says, put on the whole armor of God, that he may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. That's the only part of a bigger part of that portion of Scripture. But when it speaks to the whole armor of God, that is important that we understand that. So that's a verse to take home. That's something for you to study at home. What's the whole armor? Some of us might have a sword. Some of us might be shot on our feet. Others have a helmet. But you know what? We're still not fully equipped, in other words. Let's study that. Something good to meditate on. A few things to announce for the coming week. Again, a reminder, you can still send in your donations. They put effort in, so you can do that by e-transfer if that's what you wish. So you will see that on the bulletin, or send your checks in by mail. Either way, it's good to hear from the deacons how the accounts are still being kept up strong, and they're growing, and that is good. Let's continue to be responsible in that. For Wednesday night, something that is going to be different, and I trust you will really enjoy that. Wednesday evening, we have a program. It's a program of diverse items. It's not necessarily a theme. It's just a number of items will be shared, and you don't want to miss that. That starts at 7:30, and tomorrow there's a youth board meeting at Charlie Lowen's at 7 o'clock. We have people still going through needs, and let's continue to remember them in our prayers. It's Mother's Day today, and so obviously it's also a day. I don't know how you spend it at your home or with your circle, but let's remember the bountiful blessings that we have by the mothers among us. Let's also remember the widows who, they spend their days in their own homes. And let's make this as a time of showing that we appreciate them, that we remember them. Helen Unro's parents, or dad, is back home, thankfully so, even though not feeling totally well yet. Let's continue to remember the weebs in our circle. We'll have today a special report by Lannis and Aggie from their work in Thailand, and so I would like to give the time over to them right now.
Hi, my name is Lannis.
Hey, I'm Josiah.
What's your name?
Jada! Hi, I'm Nika. Hi, I'm Gamar. Hi, I'm Jakira. Hi, I'm Maggie.
40 degrees out here. Maybe not quite, but we had some rain last night, which is really nice. We have hot weather mixed with rain. We thank the Lord for the rain that we've been receiving, since that really has a way of cleaning up the smog that we've had to live in the last number of weeks. All right, the question was asked, how has COVID-19 affected you? And I hope you enjoyed the introductory video. We enjoyed making it. That gives you a bit of a glimpse of some of the things that we've experienced here. A lot of staying at home, doing menial tasks. When we go out, wearing masks, having your temperature checked. That seems like the new normal. We did have a lockdown here as well, and we were not allowed to, along with a curfew actually, from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. we were not allowed to leave our house, which was not that big of a deal because that's normally when we sleep anyway. However, otherwise going to the grocery store was either just myself or Eggie that would go. Getting in was you had to not have a fever, wear a mask, wear lots of hand sanitizer and so forth, and get our groceries and come back home and live like that. We've been experimenting with Grab Food a lot and bringing us Thai food. So you just in an app, you request food and it gets brought to your front door. The Grab drivers are all masked up with gloves, and yeah, they even offer contactless delivery. And so yeah, it is definitely a different world that we live in than we did just a few short months ago. Back in January, February, when the virus broke out in China, we started noticing the lack of Chinese tourists that would come to Chiang Mai. Empty roads, empty airport, empty stores, empty tourist spots, and then it just kept on going from there. And Thailand did not have an official response to COVID-19 until it really started breaking out in Italy and the US, and that is when they implemented a lockdown restricting people's movements, where there was no inter-provincial travel allowed. The flights were canceled. Just imagine, we have an airport here that has between 100 and 125 flights every day, and they were down to 4 flights per day for the last month. So the same with bus service, train service, everything was shut down. And so it's a lot quieter here. The streets in downtown Chiang Mai, busy with markets, with tourists, with people, completely quiet. And so that has made a big difference. Going to immigration now, or any public place really, you have chairs set up. They're either 1 meter apart, or if it's a row of chairs, they have every other chair marked with a red X. That means that you're not allowed to sit on them. And as far as our work, we were just a few days into our, the 6th and final term of the IGO semester. when the decision was made to send all the students home, this was quite disappointing for us, our family, for myself personally. I had just spent about 3 weeks studying and preparing for a class, and so I got to teach about 4 days, and then the students were gone. So that also meant that we had to do something about our Sunday morning church services. The government asked that large groups would not get together. And so we were deciding how can we best respect the government, respect the people around us, our neighbors, and still not forsake the assembly of believers. And so we debated, is this a Romans 13? Is this an Acts 4 situation? What do we do in something like this? And so we came up with a kind of middle ground for everyone who wanted to. We created house church groups where they would get together on Sunday mornings and have Bible studies. We did some video messaging, some of that as well, or messages via video, I should say. And that's what we've been doing. Fortunately, praise the Lord, we can open up again this Sunday. It will be the first Sunday that we can get together since the third week of March. Obviously, we have to check everyone's temperature, wear masks, and follow some guidelines like that, but it'll be good to get together with other brothers or a larger group of believers. Poverty is becoming real here. It is during this time that people make their living. During your winter out there, you get the snowbirds coming here. A lot of people come to Chiang Mai, to Thailand, during the winter months in the northern hemisphere, and so they've not been able to do that, and so it's real. There's families that are trying to survive on 1 cup of white rice per day, and that's really, really difficult. We're trying to reach out either by helping out with money, by providing meals, many things that are happening in our extended circle of friends or connections here. We are thankful that we have been spared. We are all healthy. We are doing well. We have been really busy. Even though we did not have Sunday morning services, we were still busy with hosting families here, hosting singles, and trying to connect with a number of the church people as we went along. We really noticed that the first week, the second week maybe, it was exciting maybe. No church. Get to have, see a message via video and that sort of thing. But after a week or two, people really started missing the face-to-face physical interaction with other believers. Just another sign that we were meant for fellowship. And so it has been good to host people and just connecting with them as they came to our house. Yeah, we don't know how COVID-19 will change the world, whether people will recover quickly like they did after September 11, or if this is more permanent, we don't know. But we do know that God is sovereign, He is in control, and that end times are going to come at some point in time. This last week I heard the term non-refundable minutes. You know, when we buy something in the store and we see at the bottom of the receipt, this is a non-refundable item, you check yourself, do I really want to have this? And I thought this term, a non-refundable minute, that is good to think about, that all our minutes, all our hours, all our days, our months and years are non-refundable, and that we do with them the things that God has called us to do, the things that God has wanted us to do, and not push that off. And there are at this time many, many people that are needy, that are in need of hope, that are in need of comfort, that are in need of help, and obviously in need of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we're trying to do the best that we can to extend a helping hand and to be a light wherever we are. So I hope you've enjoyed this, a little update. Thank you again for your support, and our prayer is that God will bless you and allow you to flourish in your walk with Him and whatever you do for His kingdom. Thank you, and have a blessed day.
So some of that is, it stirs in us the desire to come together. That will be good news. I sense that in my heart that will be good news when one day we will be able to say, okay, come together. Sunday morning we're coming together. Whether that's going to be in partial group or all of us, we're looking forward to the day, don't we? Where we will again greet each other, shake each other's hand, and have supper or lunch together and hear each other. We're really missing that. Good. We have a message this week. As I was getting ready for a message on Sunday, there was between 3 different messages or subjects that I was debating and asking the Lord which to preach. And I trust all of them would be good. And so there's something left for later. I settled in. As I prayed about it, I felt the peace about this. We will have a message that I'd like to say somewhat dedicated to the mothers. It being Mother's Day today, I think it deserves a subject that is more addressed into that area. And not to say that ye men and children won't get stuff. You will. In fact, I trust you will really enjoy this message. So we are going to take our main subject out of 1 Samuel. The topic of the message this morning is called Hannah Rejoices in Her Salvation. Those of you that listen in, can I ask you a question this morning? Or I'm also going to address our little audience here this morning. Just a question of curiosity. How many children did Hannah have? Who of you can help me out on that? How many children did Hannah have in her lifetime? What will you say? Does anybody dare to take the guess? And we are well-studied people, and we've known the story of Hannah all our life, and probably you did at home. And I'd like to hear from you. What's your guess? It's very obvious in the Bible. No reason to be guessing in the dark. But we know the story well enough. Sorry? 6 or 7. Okay, we have a 6 or 7. Delmer, I'm putting you on the spot. How many children? 7. 7. Where do you take that from? You that are at home, who of you is guessing more than 5? Those of us that guessed only 1 child, I have to confess that you're way out. Like Hannah had a big family. I mean, it would be considered a big family today. Hannah had at least 5 children, and my understanding 5 is what she had. 3 boys, 2 girls. That's a beautiful family to have. Some of you that are just starting with your family, you know what? That is exciting to think that in a few years from now, we might have 5 children. That's what Hannah ended up, as far as I understand. And so when we think of Hannah, most of the time we think if she was barren, at least for part of her life. And then after a while, God answered her prayers, and she had a little boy called Samuel. But there's a lot more to that story. So Hannah, at the end of her life, was a busy mother and mothering at least 5 children, except for Samuel, whom she gave to the Lord when he was young. I'm not sure what exactly the relationship was. There was some relationship. She would continue to bring him a jacket every year, and so likely she did more than that. But those are things that we find in Scripture that Hannah was still doing. Now, we're not going to emphasize those points. Like I said, the subject today is Hannah rejoices in her salvation. Now, when you look at that word salvation in 2 Samuel chapter 2, verse 1 is where it shows up. We have to understand that we're not talking about the salvation plan that Jesus made available on Mount Calvary. We will get to this in a little bit, so just hold your patience for a while. In Titus, I believe it is, we'll get there later, but there's a verse that is being misinterpreted and being probably mocked and left and misunderstood, and that is there's a verse in the Bible that says to the mothers or to the women that they will be saved by bearing their children. And so if we would take that literally, as some people do, then it would be that the women of the world would be saved because of their babies. So that's a conflicting interpretation. In fact, that would be a false interpretation. But there's something beautiful about that. And so as you sit and as you listen, your situation could be Hannah's situation, where right now you're wishing to have babies and haven't had any yet, and perhaps sit there and thinking we might never have a baby. Now, even in that, there's comfort today. And so if you turn to 1 Samuel chapter 1. And for the sake of time, I've chosen not to read all of that. It's good reading. I'll read parts of it, but you're very welcome to help yourself to a good reading later today or on a different time. Just to give us a little bit of an introduction, another interesting thing about the little boy Samuel, and those of you young men that are young boys and girls that are sitting at home and just trying to imagine Samuel's life. Samuel was raised in a town called, it's a very difficult name, Ramathias-Sophim. That was a little bit north of Jerusalem, just a little bit. It's a name you don't find on any map necessarily. And in Samuel's days, when he was a little boy, when he grew up, in fact, all the way through his life, the tabernacle was in Shiloh. Shiloh was a place not very far from the Jordan River, northeast-ish of Jerusalem. And so in Samuel's days, or the days before he was born, in Hannah's days, we will say, they had to go from Ramathias-Sophim to Shiloh, probably 3 times a year. And so the story begins, or the story is again, of one of those goings. It could have been the Passover. It could have been one of the other feasts. By the sacrifices they're making, it sounds like the Passover feast. That Elkanah, or in some of your Bibles, it's Elkanah. That's okay. We won't worry about how we pronounce the name. But this man, he grew up. He was an Israelite. His forefather was Joseph. And so Samuel was a descendant of Joseph, the man of the coat of many colors. That was Samuel's many times great-grandpa. Elkanah, which was totally acceptable and common in the days of his life, he had 2 wives. And we find that in the first few verses. What we read here in verse 2, chapter 1, and he had 2 wives. The name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children at the time. That was a huge difference. Now, to give us a little bit of a cultural background, back in the days when the Bible was written, and I don't know where we lost this culture, unfortunately, or this mindset. But nowadays, especially in the American modern idea, it's not a great honor for a woman to have babies or to have children. Back in the time, and God's design, that is obviously there, that she would have babies. And back in the days of the Bible, this was almost like a curse if you didn't have a baby. Although there is still an answer. You're waiting for that one. Hannah obviously had no children. Verse 3, and this man, which was Elkanah, went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. And the sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, we read about them in a different place as well. The priests of the Lord were there. Then in verse 4, and when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah, his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters portions. Portions in this case could have meant a small animal. I think, I'm not totally sure, but it could have also meant a portion of an animal. But portions was something that the man of the house, he would give to all of his family that had come along. The man was required by law to go there, but his family was not necessarily so, unless these were boys over 12 years old. So Elkanah was a good man, apparently, because he would give a portion to each one. None of them needed to come before the altar of God with empty hands. So he gave portions to all of them. We don't know how many children Peninnah had, but to all of them, he gave a portion, and then as he hands out the portions, it's obvious what's going to happen. Hannah is going to receive only one. Verse 5, but unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion. Look at that. That tells you a little bit about his heart, Elkanah's heart towards Hannah. For he loved Hannah. Now, you men that are sitting there at home, that is exactly what you would like to hear when your friends or your children talk about you as a father, and they would say, well, there's one thing that we always knew and saw, that Dad loves Mom. And that's something to exercise on Mother's Day and 365 days of the year, to know Dad loves Mom. That's something we know about Elkanah. We know very, very little, but we know this, that he loved Hannah, and that's why he gave her a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb. Verse 6, and her adversary. Now, this adversary here, that's an interesting detail, and as far as I can study, teach me if I'm wrong, but this is Peninnah. Her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And as he, verse 7, that he there, that's Elkanah, as he did so year by year, went she up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked Peninnah, provoked her, therefore she wept and did not eat. This is now a yearly exercise. We know that the holidays are coming, and Mom, which is Peninnah, and me, that's the Peninnah's children, we're going to go to Shiloh, and here's something that we want to give Peninnah a benefit of a doubt this morning, and that is, we know very little of her, but we know that she made life miserable to Hannah. Now, I don't want to speak anything into this portion of Scripture that doesn't belong there, but I want you to just imagine with me for just a little bit to be Peninnah's boy or little girl. There's something about Peninnah, and that is that she's proud, or at least feels very good, that she has children. Somehow that good feeling and the attitude that she had was as an adversary to Hannah, and Hannah had a very difficult time with that. Now, we will leave that out. Maybe there was an ill attitude. There was probably some kind of a competing race feeling that she was better, and obviously Hannah was dealing with that. Your child, now let's be Peninnah for a bit. Does your child feel that Mom is really blessed? She feels good about me being her child. She's so happy to have me. I don't know what Peninnah's everyday exercise was, but we're getting a window here that I would say is really positive, isn't it? Peninnah was good feeling because she had babies. We keep reading. Verse 8. Then said Elkanah, her husband, to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? In other words, why are we to go through this again? Like last year we had the same thing. Why weepest thou, and why eatest thou not? After all, this is the yearly picnic. This is the yearly good time. And why is thy heart grieved? All others are happy, you're grieved. And here's the big question, or the big statement. It's in a question. Am not I better to thee than 10 sons? You know, I've taken this statement, and I don't want to read anything into there that is not meant to be. But there was something in Elkanah that he felt, me as a husband, I should be satisfying that vacancy of your life. That desire to have a baby, which you don't have, I am here to fill that, as well as 10 little boys would, or boys. In a husband-wife relationship, God's design or God's desire is that there will be a total satisfaction. There will always be a desire to have babies. Of course it is. It's godly. It's God-given. It's natural. But that relationship, I am here to fulfill that too. And if God gives children, well, the better. We're going to look into our message today, and I want to split it up in 4 points. Point number 1 is a life of struggling, fret, and of conflict. The second point, prayer and its results. The third point, Hannah's defense. in time of misunderstanding. And the last point, that's the main point, her salvation. Point number 1, a life of struggling and of conflict. Hannah had no children. That's bottom line, and that's what she lived with for a while. Her adversary, as I already read in verse 6, she provoked her steadily. There must have been serious conflict. Now, we don't read anything about Hannah that we would think that there was a fighting and a verbal abuse at all. Like, that's not who she seems to be. This was a year by year, like I already said. Seems like a yearly occurrence. There comes the time of the year, and we already all know Mom is going to be miserable. And she wept, she didn't eat, she couldn't enjoy life. Just couldn't, not these days. Her husband, as I also already said, tries to console her. Am I not better than 10 sons? You know what? That's every husband's heart as you sit as a mother. And even though you might have your sons, but your husband's heart is still to have that place. Better than 10 sons. More important. Elkanah said this, and we could read it into there. I have great joy in having you as my wife. I want you to be happy. He would have wished to see offspring of his own life from Hannah, of course, 10 sons. But he was okay to not receive them. That's another piece of good history that we're probably losing, and that is the desire to have offspring, the desire to have sons that will carry my name. But Hannah had a struggle, and the Bible explains it or terms it in different ways, in an interesting way. She wept, of course, that's easy to understand. Then in verse 10, it uses the term bitterness of soul. Now, when you go into your Bible, you will find that the term bitterness of soul is used only in another book, and that's Job. Job was in bitterness of soul. What it tells to me, Jesus, the hour before the hour when he prayed, he said something like that as well. My soul is grieved till death. So Hannah's description here is bitterness of soul. Now, we're not looking at bitterness and being angry necessarily, but just a very intensified desire. She's also described in verse 11 as being afflicted. And verse 16, she says it herself, abundance of complaint and grief. Now, as we look at all of that, we might not get the impression that she was a really happy woman. And obviously this was huge to Hannah. That's why I like what we will get to here, the salvation, her salvation. Now, we want to look at her prayer and also its results. Her prayer starts in chapter 1, verse, where was it here? Verse 11, verse 10 actually. But in verse 10, it's where she starts, as it says, and she was in bitterness of soul and prayed unto the Lord and wept sore. And then verse 11, and that's the only verse that is really her prayer. I'll read the prayer to you. And she vowed. Oh, that's how it starts. She makes a vow. That tends to sometimes happen when we're in desperation. We're making vows. So always be careful when you make a vow to the Lord. It is good to make vows. I can speak of vows of my own life. Number one, the vow to just stay faithful to God. There's other vows, and I won't speak about them right now, but I face them in my life, and I trust you have the same thing. But the odd time I'm faced with something and I remember, I made a vow to God that as long as I live, this is going to be my practice. Recently, I made a vow I would never share something that was inappropriate to share. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, there's the big word, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid. There's a word that we need to look at or need to remember. That speaks of her attitude, of thine handmaid, and remember me. It doesn't mean that God had forgotten her, but that's how she felt. And remember me and not forget thine handmaid, there it is again, but will give unto thine handmaid, again, a man-child. She was so specific, she prayed for a little boy. Then here's the vow, I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life. There was times when babies or boys or girls were dedicated to God for a term. But she gives him all the days of his life. And look at what she does. She's back to Numbers chapter 4. We're not going to read Numbers chapter 4, but if you go ahead and read Numbers chapter 4, the first 26 verses, and you will find that there was a practice called making a Nazarite. So a Nazarite was somebody that was committed to work and to just be in full service to God. There was, I think, always, correct me if I'm wrong, but always the Nazarite would have an outward symbol of being a Nazarite. Most of the cases it would be long hair. So Samson was a Nazarite, John the Baptist was a Nazarite, and Samuel was a Nazarite. And here's the sign of knowing that he was a Nazarite. Everybody knew, oh, you're a Nazarite, because there shall no razor come upon his head. So Samuel never had a haircut. That's the vow she makes before she ever conceived any child. What were the results? Well, let me read a few other details into there. We'll get to the results. Verse 12. And it came to pass, as she continued praying, and we don't know what that was, before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. You know what? It tells us another thing, and that is that everybody more or less prayed the same way. We tend to run into those ruts where when we pray, we just do certain things, but not necessarily with our heart. Now, Hannah had become so intently into prayer, she didn't care whether she was praying like everybody else. She just poured out the bitterness of her soul. That's something that's very important for us as we come into the presence of God, that we also focus on our soul between us and God, whether that is the same actions or not of the average flow. But anyway, it caused the attention of Eli. Eli, as the priest, as the voice of God at the time, he opens his mouth. Look at what he has to say. Verse 14. Well, let me read verse 13. And it came to pass as verse 13. Now Hannah, she spake in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. Obviously, the practice was to pray aloud. Some of us like to pray in quiet. That's all right, but they prayed aloud back in the days of Hannah. Verse 14. These are the words of the leader. These are the words of the man who carried the voice of God. And Hannah hears them face to face. What would you do as a mother if somebody would suggest this to you? And Eli said unto her, how long? Now remember, she is in desperation. She is in bitterness of soul, and she's being interrupted. How long wilt thou continue to be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. That's the words she hears from the man of God. As I worked on this, and as I pondered, and as I tried to put myself into the shoes of Hannah, or you as a mother today, or as an individual, it doesn't matter who you are, this thought came to my mind. How many Christians today would never come to church again if they would experience something like this? They would feel the rest of their life that I am not going to step into that presence of Eli ever again. Because the way how he spoke to me, the way how he vastly misunderstood my heart. Here she is in bitterness of soul, and she's being considered drunken. Now let me just continue. That's not the worst yet. It's look at the next verse. And Hannah answered. Is she angry? No. Is she hurt? Doesn't seem like it. She's just standing on the truth. As long, mother, and everybody else who's listening, as long as you and I will stand on the truth, we will be free. We will not come into bondage. We will not get hurt. We will not get injured. But as soon as I slip off the truth and I allow my heart to sink into thoughts that are not true, you can become very, very miserable. You can live in self-pity. Your life is a ruin. But here's Hannah. Let's look closely. And Hannah answered and said, "No, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit." Now, that doesn't sound very self-exalting at all. That's just who I am. I'm a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I wonder how many of us as people or mothers or women would feel good to say, "I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit." But that's what she says, and that's what she was. "I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but," listen to this, "but I have poured out." Can I ask you a question? When you have water in your container and you pour it out, after you have poured it out, what's in the container? It's obviously empty. Some of us like to use the terms and say, "I was on my knees with the Lord and I just poured out my heart to him." I say the same thing. After you have poured out your heart, it's poured out. Your sorrowful spirit has poured out. It's not there any longer. And we see that with Hannah the same way. I think we use that term sometimes in a very, very wrong way. Very often when we say, "I poured it out," indeed, I haven't poured anything out. I walk away with the same thing. But anyway, Hannah, she poured out her heart or soul, as it says, "but have poured out my soul before the Lord." Now think of it. She is facing Eli, the highest respected man of Israel at the time. And that's what I've done. I love that. That's a way that I would love to bless every mother this morning. That there is absolutely no reason in your life that you should feel defeated, that you should feel mistreated or misunderstood. There might be a reason, humanly speaking. And there is, obviously, we all experience that. But to live in a genuine truth that you can face even the greatest man, in this case Eli, and you speak the truth. This is what I've done. Unfortunately, many mothers today live in self-pity and have a hard time to cope in their mothering. If you find yourself in such, pour out your heart. Pour it out. Leave it there. Verse 17, here's the result part of the prayer. Listen, Eli obviously didn't say, "I'm sorry," as I would have if I had been in his case, because that's what you say nowadays. But nonetheless, he understood how wrong he was. Then Eli answered and said, "Go in peace." Well, Hannah had done the preparation. She had poured out her hearts of sorrow. Now that same man spoke, "Go in peace. And the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him." And she said, "Let thine handmaid find grace." There's the word, I used it before. "In thy sight." So the woman, now listen to Hannah. So the woman, or Hannah, went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. As we celebrate Mother's Day, my prayer, my desire would be that for each mother. If you feel sadness, discouragement, defeat, in whatever shape or form it comes into your life, that we could all come to this grace and walk away and start to eat. That's probably physically eating, but it's mentally feeding your soul. That brings us to the third point. Sorry, that brings us to the last point. I just included the third point. That was Hannah's defense. There's another thing that I wanted to add to Hannah's defense, and that's the woman of Canaan. Matthew 15 and verse 26. That's the woman that had the child that was diseased. She approaches Jesus in Matthew 15 verse 25 or 24 it is, but in verse 26, this is Jesus' response, or he had just responded that he had come for Israel. He could not give the bread to the dogs. And so there was all the reasons for this woman to feel hurt. But this is how she answered. Okay, this is Jesus' word, verse 26. But he answered and said, it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. You can read so much hurt and pain in that statement of Jesus' words that, again, you would never come back. Unless you see yourself as a handmaid, as a servant. It doesn't matter. A truly servant's attitude doesn't get hurt. That's the beauty of that. A truly honest, humble attitude doesn't get hurt. It's amazing. Hurt and pride goes hand in hand. I think we all have felt that. Verse 27, this is her response. And she said, truth. Did you hear before what I said about truth? To base our faith, to base our feelings on truth. This Canaanite woman, truth, Lord. Yet the dogs, which I am, in her mind, she had just been told so, eat of the crumbs which fall from the master's table. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I might be the smallest. I might be insignificant. Mother, as a mom's life, we have a very anti-American modern day philosophy in Matthew chapter 15. It doesn't work in the time that we live in if we want to live in the stream of life. This is way out. So you and I have to choose sometimes in which of the two will I live. And my prayer is that we would all choose to live in the honest, humble, real, truthful living. This is who I am. I am a handmaid in the hands and the eyes of God. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole. Now let's go to the last point. We need to get that through here in the next 5 minutes. Her salvation. That's the point of the message. We are here to look at Hannah's salvation. Hannah was praising God for salvation. Now, as I already alluded a little bit about the woman being saved by the bearing of her children, let's just do here some quick looking at Hannah's outcome. At the end of Samuel's portion of life, she later had another 4 children. But in verse 24, obviously now she has had the boy, and when she had weaned him, she took him up for her with 3 bullocks and 1 ephah of flour and a bottle of wine, and brought him unto the house of the Lord in Shiloh. And the child was young, probably 3 or more years old, maybe 5. Weaning at that time was different than it is nowadays. Then in verse 27, listen to that verse. And I would like to lay this to the heart of every mother. As you look at your young boys, or maybe they're older, maybe they're all married and already have their own boys. It doesn't matter what age. Here's what I wish that mothering would really include. For this child, I have prayed. Verse 27. She came to Eli, the man that called her a drunkard. And she stood before him that day and she said, for this child, I have prayed. There's a relationship that started between me and God with this child long before he was born. That happened in the temple here some years ago. I have prayed for this child. There's a godly possession in this baby because my prayer has gone with him. That's something that we as mothers or as parents can truly cherish. And we need to cherish that as we look at our children as they grow up. And there's times where it is a struggle. There's times when it is more than busy. I have prayed for this child. That's not just the natural outcome of being married, even though it might seem like it. But I have involved godliness right from the day of conception, or maybe even before that. There's so much power. There's so much beauty in that. It is a result of God's grace. It's not, and I pray that you and I as parents, and especially as mothers, we wouldn't see our children as just a natural outcome of a married life, which is beautiful in its own self. Then we come to chapter 2, and it says, and Hannah prayed and said, my heart rejoiceth in the Lord, my horn is exalted in the Lord, my mouth is enlarged. Oh, Hannah must have been a very, very talkative woman, and this is what she was talking all about. And she says about, and her focus is on God. The next 10 verses reveal that. But here she says, my mouth is enlarged over mine enemies because I rejoice in my salvation. There's the word salvation. She had received freedom from something that held her in being tempted, from fretting, from being a sorrowful spirit. She was now a woman, and that's the next verses reveal who she was after this. My heart rejoiceth. That's the mothers that I pray that we could be, a rejoicing mother. But how do you do this? My horn, that's when you talk out something very loud. Because I rejoice in my salvation. She was now free. She was redeemed. She was saved from bondage and could now call God holy. She called God as a God of no other. He was a rock. That's the next verse. He's a God of knowledge. And on the list goes. She describes God. Have you ever thought about that? You pray for something, you really desire something, and God answers it, God gives it. And then we continue to focus on what we have received. The thing is, you and I can pray for a beautiful garden this year, or whatever you pray for. But unless we take our focus from the thing that we have prayed for, the gift of God, and turn to God, we will soon find in our gift that there's pieces missing, and we can become right back into misery. But she laid her focus on God. Read the next 10 verses. Memorize them if you will. There's something, it doesn't speak of Samuel. It doesn't speak of barrenness. It doesn't express any kind of that. It's just God had become the center. That's where salvation is. Question in closing. Mothers especially, but every one of us. Have you received this salvation? Can you today focus and rejoice in what the Lord has done? Are you steadily, constantly focusing on what he has done in your life? Does your family, do your children find that mom, and I like to include mom and dad, I like to include everybody, that they are rejoicing in what the Lord has done? They're worshiping. We could go into that. Can I pray with you? Let's bow. God, we thank you so much. A Father of grace, a Father of knowledge, a Father that killeth and maketh alive. A Father that is a rock that can save us from bondage. Thank you so much, Father. We thank you so much for your word. Lord, this morning, as the mothers have listened in, I have a special prayer for each mother, that you would grant her a spirit of rejoicing. I pray that each mom would get, if she hasn't it yet, a focus on God, on a Father whom she delights to worship, whom she delights to think about. I pray that we would, as man, all be man of Elkanah, who would be that of 10 sons to her wives. We thank you so much that you bless us with godly mothers. So many of us have the privilege of growing up or having grown up in a godly mothered home. God, you are to be glorified in that. We pray your blessing, and I pray your protection on all mothers. In Jesus' name, amen.
.52. 552. I need thee every hour. We will omit verse 2.
I need thee every hour, most gracious Lord. No tender voice like thine can peace is afford. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. I need thee every hour, in joy or pain. Come quickly and abide, or life is vain. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. I need thee every hour. Teach me thy will, and thy rich promises in me fulfill. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to thee. I need thee every hour, most holy one. Oh, make me thine indeed, thou blessed Son. I need thee, oh, I need thee. Every hour I need thee. Oh, bless me now, my Savior. I come to